everyone, and welcome to this week's Wildlife Wednesday Weekly Roundup. I'm your host, Tenley Thompson, and we've got some great video content to show you from all over the greater Yellowstone ecosystem this week. The way this works is we're going to show you the very best video that our guides have taken throughout this week, all throughout the valley. Then you're going to have a chance to win our trivia question of the week to our EcoTour store. Lastly, I'll be answering your questions as a wildlife biologist live. So if you've got any great questions you want to ask me that are wildlife, biology, Yellowstone, Grand Teton, I don't know, weather, space, whatever you feel like asking me related, I'm here to answer them. Let's go ahead and start with an EcoTour Adventures favorite, Laura, as she discusses one of my favorite species, mountain goats.
Oh, hey guys. This is Laura. I climbed up this cliff face today to tell you all about mountain goats who live in really extreme places. Oh man, whew, that's high. Goats are well equipped and adapted to live in these really steep, rocky areas. They've got strong, muscular shoulders as well as girthy necks and athletic hindquarters to help propel them up these rocky cliff faces. Even though mountain goats look really bulky from the side, they're actually quite slender from the front for their best balance in this really steep terrain. They also have specialty dual textured hooves, which are a lot like my climbing shoes for the best grip onto the rocks. Their inner hoof is soft and padded, almost like the soft rubber compound of my climbing shoe for their best grip onto the rock. The padding also comes in handy when they're jumping from rock to rock to act as shock absorbers or like padding. Their hooves also have a more durable outer shell for balance and grip, as well as durability in these really sharp, rocky places. Although I'm grateful to have seen mountain goats in the wild in Yellowstone National Park, I'd like to explain that the mountain goat is a non-native species here in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, which includes Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Parks, as well as surrounding public land areas. Mountain goats were introduced to the region in the 1940s, 50s, and 70s by humans as a big game species. People wanted the challenge of hunting for mountain goats in these extreme environments. But mountain goats have done really well for themselves regionally on their own, and they've spread out into or colonized areas within the national park boundaries, which puts them in competition with our native bighorn sheep. Bighorn sheep are a species that are supposed to be here. They inhabit the same environments as the mountain goats. They prefer to be high in the mountains, up in that extreme terrain on the cliffs. And unfortunately, mountain goats are using up their valuable resources. Additionally, mountain goats can transmit disease to our native bighorn sheep, which are extremely naive to pathogens that can cause them pneumonia. So now we've come to a controversy about what to do with these mountain goats. Some people want to keep the mountain goats, others want to destroy them, at least in this region where mountain goats are non-native. Yellowstone National Park does not have a plan about removing non-native goats. Grand Teton, however, has gone through with a plan to remove non-native goats from high in the Teton mountain range. Please do not try this at home. My anchor here is not AMGA certified, so please don't try this. Don't be like me. Stay safe. See you later.
So a big thanks to Laura with that great update on one of our more controversial species in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem, but boy are they cute and fuzzy as well. Mountain goats. Now, I'm sure there'll be lots of questions in the comment section. We did address this situation a couple weeks ago, but I'm certainly glad to answer any more questions anybody has about mountain goats and where they belong and where they don't belong and their place in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. Now, I've got kind of a fun end of the fall season video for you all of all the latest things that have been going on and sort of a fun farewell for a couple weeks to Yellowstone National Park, which closed its doors to road-based vehicle travel this week. It will open up in December for snow coach and snowmobile travel, and we'll be excited to be back up there again. But let's go ahead and take a look at the latest as we transition from fall into winter conditions and a fond farewell to Yellowstone for the time being. Fall is always a wonderful time to be in Jackson Hole with its golden aspens and beautiful colors in the Tetons. And we were beginning to see dustings of snow in the last week in the high peaks. And then suddenly, with very little warning, we found ourselves thrust into quite a lot of winter weather. Elk, moose, bison, pronghorn, all were found probably pretty by surprise by several inches of snow that fell in the valley. And it was an interesting transition this week from our lovely late summer, early fall conditions to these sudden winter conditions that are a bit unseasonable for this time of year. The two snowstorms and their very cold temperatures are some of the coldest conditions in Jackson Hole's history, and the weather pattern was certainly unusual, but got a lot of animals setting themselves up for the winter season, busy storing away food, getting ready, and beginning to migrate toward the southern ends of the valley where there's less snow. Our plant life was also getting ready for our winter season. And winter in Jackson Hole can last as long as 5, sometimes 6 months or even longer. It's a beautiful time of year to be here with frost and snowy conditions that are unlike anywhere else in the country. So we thought it would be kind of fun to take a look at some of these snowy conditions and give you an idea of what's in store for our awesome winter season here in Jackson Hole. Sarah Ernst was up in Yellowstone this week and certainly got taken by surprise by a rather large hailstorm in the Lewis Canyon. And it was pretty fun for her guests to see some of these hailstones, some of which got quite large in what was October. You guys, it was still October and we were having snowstorms. It's absolutely ridiculous. I certainly haven't seen a lot of snowstorms in October in the time since I've lived here, and it's definitely been a real wake-up call that we've got to get ready for winter. But there's so many good things to look forward to. In the meantime, elk were seen traveling by the thousands down through the valley floor, making their way to the National Elk Refuge. Now, lots of different animals prepare in winter in different ways. Our black bear population was putting in sort of a last hurrah in the last week or two. Most of those black bears are likely now gone into their hibernatory dens with those snowstorms, which are an indication to them that it's time to go in for that long winter's nap. But we did get a few last hurrahs from our black bear population, feeding up on some shriveled berries, digging up a couple things root-wise in the ground, finding a couple gut piles and carcasses, but mostly these black bears are asleep at this point. EcoTour's naturalist Tom got a great look at this black bear getting a couple last bites in before the hormones activate in his brain that tell him when he's gaining fewer calories than he's spending foraging for food, that it's definitely time to go into a torpor and into a state where he's going to be using up less energy and start burning those fat molecules for calories that he's been building up through hyperphagia conditions throughout the fall. Now, you may not know this, but Jackson Hole is famous for having one of the greatest numbers of species of rodents in the world, over 42 different species. And many of them, like this least chipmunk, also hibernate throughout the winter. But they're going through a very different hibernatory process than a bear. A bear's going into torpor. Their body temperature is just a little lower than normal. Their heart and respiration rate is just a little bit lower than normal. Something like this least chipmunk is going through a much more severe metabolic change. Their body temperature will be just a couple degrees above freezing. Their respiration rate will be just a breath or two a minute. And their heart rate will be so low that it's difficult for scientists to understand how they can still perfuse organs at such a low heart rate. To see these animals underground hibernating would have the appearance of death. But they are still alive and will be back for spring. By comparison, a bear's torpor, a bear can easily be woken up during hibernation, and female bears who are pregnant will probably wake up to go into labor and delivery. It's a completely different metabolic system between the two species, and a pretty fascinating interchange of how animals survive the winter. Now, one animal who takes their winter strategy to an extreme are the pronghorn antelope, who are slowly moving out of the valley and moving on their annual migration to the south. These animals are traveling over 100 miles down to the Green River Valley, down towards Pinedale, Wyoming every year, in an annual migration that's known as the Path of the Pronghorn. Very few land animals migrate as far as pronghorn antelope do on their annual migration each spring up into Grand Teton National Park, and then in the fall back down towards the Green River Valley. And there's lots and lots of conflict and problems that are going to be in the way. Pronghorn actually have very few abilities to jump over fences. They're built for speed, being the second fastest land animals on the planet. They can go over 60 miles an hour, but they can't clear a fence. They're built for running, not for jumping. And so pronghorn actually have to make their way underneath fences when they migrate, and there's not always a lot of room for them. Low rungs of barbed wire are a serious problem for these animals as they migrate. Luckily, lots of different nonprofits, groups, and the state of Wyoming are working hard to create safe wildlife crossings for this species so that it can perpetuate this amazing annual migration for many generations to come, and hopefully into the days of my great-great-grandchildren. Meanwhile, back in Jackson Hole, moose have gone from their annual summer ritual of eating into the fall ritual of the rut. Laura caught this group of moose, including this bull and cow that he was courting, actually in the northern range of Yellowstone. And it was a pretty exciting chase for these two. This young bull was displaying for this female who wasn't showing a tremendous amount of interest, probably based on his young age and his small antler size. However, he wasn't having it, and pretty quickly a chase ensued between the two. The female continued to try and move away from this bull moose, and this bull moose, when displaying it wasn't good enough, actually ended up chasing her at pretty high speed. Now, moose are typically pretty sedate animals, and so people forget that they can run almost 45 miles an hour when they need to. The resulting pursuit was definitely the highlight of the multi-day trip that Laura and her guests were on that week. In the end, this bull was unsuccessful in pursuing this cow. She just wasn't having it, and he just exhausted himself in the effort. It was pretty interesting later on to see him just panting himself away in these heavy bushes. There's a reason that moose don't run at a high speed all that often, and that's because they have a very difficult time keeping themselves cool. They can pant, they've got sweat glands in their hooves, but other than that, it's actually really hard for them to cool themselves down when they become overheated. So unfortunately for this young bull, no success with that cow, a lot of exhaustion, but certainly hopefully he learned something to help him be more successful for next year. Kelsey had a really interesting interaction in Grand Teton National Park with these two bulls and cows right after that snowstorm we spoke of, where actually you can see one of these bull moose has snapped one of his antlers off. Now, antlers, once they've shed their velvet, don't have nerve endings, and so it's debatable whether that was painful at all for this bull. Probably not, but you can see he still wasn't giving up, and he was desperately still trying to court this female with that one lone antler holding it towards her head, holding his head up in display and trying to show off. Much to everyone's surprise, it actually appeared to work. This cow moose was very impressed by this bull and actually ended up courting with him for some time. It's unclear whether the two of these actually bred, but this is the first time I've actually ever seen anything from the deer family, whether it be a moose, a deer, an elk, or the like, being successful when one of their antlers has broken off. Which just goes to show you, if you are impressive enough, you are impressive enough with a broken antler or not. So a really interesting view from Kelsey, and we thank her for going out there in all that snow and getting this absolutely fascinating footage of these two. Now, one of the sad things about changing from season to season is Yellowstone, as we move into these more wintry, snowy conditions, did close this week for car traffic. It will reopen in December for over-snow, snow coach, and snowmobile travel. But in the meantime, I thought it would be fun to get another look at the sounds of Yellowstone in the last week that we had with it open and bid it a fond farewell until it's reopening this winter. So let's take a listen in and take a look at some of our favorite things we've seen in the last week or two in America's first national park.
Boardwalk this way.
So, pretty amazing season we've had in Yellowstone National Park. It's always a little hard to see the park close, but we got to let that snow build up so we can get on over snow travel. Yellowstone National Park gets an unbelievable amount of snow in the winter, particularly in the southern entrance. Generally speaking, more than 50 feet is not unusual. So more than 1,000 inches of snow. And obviously, if you're an animal, you have to migrate out of that or die, which, of course, the exception being the geyser basins. Some animals, particularly moose, will actually move down into those geyser basins because the heat of the ground and the thermal areas actually does melt the snow and allows them to graze on grasses year round. But the consequence of that is, unfortunately, that there is silica sinter geyserite minerals being extruded by those thermal features that does get into the grass. That silica is very hard on their teeth. And so not migrating is a whole lot easier than migrating, but it does wear their teeth down. So they do have a shorter lifespan, those bison that live in those geyser basins. So kind of an interesting little side note there. Most of our elk in the National Elk Refuge in the wintertime do come out of Grand Teton and the surrounding areas. But historically, back in 1955, about 25% of our elk came out of Yellowstone National Park. Today, that number is a little bit lower. Preliminary research suggests maybe 7 to 9% are coming out of Yellowstone National Park, but elk are still making that incredibly long journey, much the same as pronghorn antelope are making. And of course, mule deer make big migrations this time of year too. More on that next week. We also have a great update on elk from Verlin for you next week. We had sort of some internet issues all day, so I couldn't quite get that video up for you. We'll delay it till next week. That's all right. But in the meantime, I think it'd be interesting to check in with our EcoTours naturalist and staff photographer, Josh Metten, who had a great blog post up this week about some of the great fall wildlife watching opportunities into winter that are available. So Maddie, hopefully in the comment section, who's moderating the comments today, everybody say hi to Maddie in the comments. We'll go ahead and grab that blog post for you so that you guys can see it for a link. But this is the video that accompanies that, and he's talking a little bit about some of our greatest sightings we've seen in the past this time of year. So this isn't current video, guys. This wasn't taken this week, but it's some of our favorite video from years past.
Hello everybody, EcoTour Adventures naturalist Josh Metten here. It's November. I'm in Gardner, Montana, just outside the north entrance of Yellowstone National Park. It's officially the off-season for Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Parks, but for the wildlife in this area, it's anything but. I've got a little video for you to show you some of the things that are going on wildlife-wise, and I also want you to check out the EcoTour Adventures blog for our most recent blog post on what's going on and what to see with wildlife in November and December.
One of our favorite late fall and early winter sightings are the moose that concentrate out in the sagebrush flats of Grand Teton National Park. Throughout most of the year, moose are largely solitary, but over the next few months, we'll often see them in groups feeding on antelope bitterbrush. Elk migrations, of course, are something that we see a lot this time of year, and we start seeing increasing numbers of elk on the National Elk Refuge as well, something that we'll end up with upwards of 5,000 elk on the refuge by January, February. An amazing sight to see. With elk, you get wolves. Wolf sightings increase in late fall and winter as pups start traveling with the packs and prey concentrate in the valley. Though the wolf watching in Grand Teton and the National Elk Refuge can be really good, Yellowstone's northern range just might be one of the best places on Earth to view wild wolves. Winter birds. As bird nerds, we are excited every year to see the first rough-legged hawks return to the valley each fall. These hawks nest above the Arctic Circle each summer, but spend the winters down in the continental U.S. Migratory bald and golden eagles, along with many waterfowl species, including large numbers of trumpeter swans, also find refuge in Jackson Hole during the winter. Last but not least, bighorn sheep. If you haven't seen bighorn sheep butting heads during the rut or mating season, you have to give it a look. These guys will ram each other at the equivalent of running into a wall at 20 miles an hour. And don't get concussions.
Ooh, oh my God, ouch.
Late fall wildlife watching in Jackson Hole is well worth it. Check out the EcoTour Adventures blog to learn more about what not to miss.
I like Susan's comment in the comment section there. Those hawks are incredible. Rough-legged hawks are amazing, and they're not necessarily a common sight elsewhere in the United States, but they can be quite common here in the wintertime, and they're so much fun to watch all winter long. We have so much hawk activity, bald eagle activity, golden eagle activity. This is the place to see hawks and birds of prey any time of year. We have over 42 of them, which is more than anywhere else in the United States, but it is a particularly good time to see them in the winter. Every winter I do my Christmas bird count, and I'm always amazed how many birds of prey I am finding. It's usually like December 21st or so when that count takes place. By the way, if you want to participate in bird counts where you live, it's a really, really fun activity. Almost every region in the United States does do a bird count every year, the week of Christmas. Contact your local birding organization, Audubon Society, or Bird Club to find out more about how you can do it. It's a great way to get into birding. They'll just partner you up with an expert or somebody who's quite good who will show you lots of birds, probably more birds in one day than you ever planned on seeing, for sure. So in the meantime, a big thanks to Josh. We're really looking forward to our winter season. And guys, I want to know where you're watching from. Some of you guys have told us in the comment section. It's always a blast to see some familiar faces, some folks I've taken out on trips who are actually in the comments today. I'm so excited to see you all. And of course, everybody who tunes in with us every week, I'm so flattered that you'd like to spend your Wednesday with us. We do have a fun video here from Tyler about some of the migratory and non-migratory birds that we've been seeing. We are right over the western North American flyway, and so we are fortunate in that we see lots and lots of birds flying over who don't live here but are on their way elsewhere during our migratory season. Let's check in with him.
Hello everyone, my name is Tyler Greenlee and welcome to Wildlife Wednesdays. As winter draws ever closer and the last of the fall leaves drop to the ground, most of our migratory bird species have left for the winter. However, we still have a huge variety of residential bird species that will stick with us for the entire winter. Let's go and check out some of these cool birds.
One of the rarest residential birds we have in Grand Teton is the greater sage grouse. Here we have a female sage grouse walking down what looks like a dirt path. This species is highly dependent on the sagebrush in the winter for cover and for food. They're one of the most specialized species out here. That sagebrush cover is extremely important because one of the grouse's key predators lives out here. And here it is, the golden eagle, one of the largest birds of prey in North America, rivaled in size only by the bald eagle and the California condor. This is a juvenile golden eagle, which is on the ground, which is an unusual sighting. Usually you see these birds up in the air patrolling their territory and hunting. It's likely that this bird flew down to the ground to actually try and catch a small mammal. At this time of year, we're also getting an influx of migratory birds. Here's a flock of them. These are redheads, and looks like interspersed in the redheads are also ringneck ducks. These are diving ducks that can actually dive to the bottom of Jackson Lake. Now, the other type of duck that we get here at this time of year is known as a dabbling duck. And here's an example of a dabbling duck. This is a male gadwall that is currently in its breeding plumage. And you can see it's bobbing its head like that as a female gadwall swims by. These males are beginning to court these females for the winter. They'll stick with each other for the entire winter, and when the female finally lays her eggs in the spring, the pair will separate. Gadwalls are also special because they are known as kleptoparasites, and what that is and what that means is that they steal food from other birds. Now, here's another diving duck. This is a really beautiful ringneck duck. And unlike the dabbling ducks, which feed primarily on the surface of the water, oh, there he goes. Diving ducks, like their name says, actually dive to the bottom of lakes and ponds to feed on those mollusks and crustaceans. Now, Grand Teton is in a migration corridor known as the Rocky Mountain Flyway, and we have hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of waterfowl migrating through this area at this time of year. And that includes a variety of birds, trumpeter swans, a variety of ducks, coots as we have here, as well as this female gadwall. And all these birds are expending huge amounts of energy to actually migrate thousands of miles down the Rocky Mountains. And that is very metabolically expensive, which is why these birds are feeding so vigorously. And here you can see that female gadwall practicing that kleptoparasitism again. She's actually standing on the backs of the coots as they dive underwater to catch insects and to feed on plant matter. And so she is getting a free meal from all their hard work. Oh, here she goes again, standing on the back of that coot. Each water bird really does have a specialized niche. Here's a group of cormorants, which are a water bird just like the ducks, except they're eating fish. They have a very hooked bill, which they use to snag prey underwater. And these birds mainly hunt in the evenings and mornings when the fish are most active. During the day, they will gather on the banks and sun themselves.
All right. Pretty great stuff. Always good to hear from Tyler, one of our resident bird experts. Tyler actually got an opportunity to go out on a birding specific tour, which is something we offer yesterday, and told me he got some unbelievable footage. So lots more birds coming in from Tyler. Couldn't quite get them to you today. Like I said, our internet was on and off all day, so we're having some connection issues. But more from Tyler for sure on that. He's very quickly becoming one of our very favorites here on Wildlife Wednesday. And if you end up coming into Jackson Hole and want to go out on a trip with us, if you do love birds, Sean and Tyler are definitely our bird experts. I would certainly request them, although when people say they want to go on a birding trip, oftentimes that's the guide that we will go ahead and pair with them. Meantime, though, I do want to let everybody know that we do offer a 10% discount on our trips to anybody who mentions the Wildlife Wednesday Weekly Roundup. We want to know who's watching this, and every once in a while, if it ends up means you come out on trips. I've taken out quite a few of our viewers over this summer, which has been such a delight and super, super fun. I also want to let everybody know about our awesome binocular giveaway that we're having. If you haven't had a chance to enter to win yet, we're giving away one of these Maven 8x42 binoculars. They're worth about $325, and you could have them. We'll ship them right to you. All you have to do is subscribe to our weekly newsletter, which is just full of fun wildlife stuff. We're not advertising at you with that newsletter. We're just talking about all the cool critters we saw, because we're all a bunch of animal nerds. You do also have to follow us on Facebook and Instagram. If you're watching this broadcast, you're probably already following us on Facebook. Maddie will put up the details of this offer, but the winner's going to be selected on November 6th. So you just have a couple more days to enter. You get one entry per platform, per person and post. So feel free to definitely follow us on social media, subscribe to our newsletter, win these binoculars. Seems like pretty easy to me, an easy thing to get yourself a pair of binoculars. And I gotta tell you, those Maven binoculars, which are locally made, are some of the best binoculars I've ever used. They're just awesome optics, and we feature them on all of our wildlife trips, along with Maven spotting scopes. They're just great equipment. So anyway, the point of all this being, you want a pair of binoculars? This seems like a really easy way to get a pair of binoculars. All right, it's my favorite part of the program, which is our trivia questions of the week. Now, last week's trivia question, quite a few of you had trouble with this one. I'm feeling proud of myself. I may have finally asked a stumper. The way this works, guys, is you are going to be entered in for a chance to win a $10 gift card to our EcoTour store if you just comment in the comment section with the correct answer to this week's trivia question. Now, we started the online store as a way to pay for employee health insurance when we originally closed back in March because of COVID, so that we'd all have health insurance and we'd be able to stay healthy while we're in sort of these pandemic times. So if you'd like to support us, we've got some crazy cool stuff in our store. Definitely Maddie will put up a link in, I'm sure, just a minute, and you can check some of this out. My favorite item of the week, which I'm hoping Maddie will find for us, is our EcoTour Adventures favorite. Laura has made some $3.99 stickers that are some of the funniest stickers I've ever seen. All 4 cubs are featured in these stickers. She's got some bling. It says $3.99 on it. She's sitting on a crown, on a throne of parking cones. It is one of the best stickers I've ever seen. I've gone ahead and I've already thrown it up on my water bottle. I'm a big lover of this one. So that's my featured item of the week. We did go ahead and put up some more stuff all this week. So if you haven't tuned into the store lately, go check it out. There's all sorts of new things just in time for the Christmas season. We're going to have even more stuff. We're kind of trying to get ready for Black Friday and the holiday season, but lots more wildlife-oriented stuff, locally made art, guide-made art, all sorts of really fun things are coming to the store in the coming weeks. So definitely check that out. Okay, so last week's question was what type of rock mined by native tribes in Yellowstone can be honed into a spear blade or arrowhead with an edge sharper than surgical steel? That question's brought to us by our great quizmaster and naturalist, Sarah Ernst. Some of you guys got this right, but I'd say about 90% of you guys said flint, which is not correct. You're right, a lot of arrowheads are made of flint through a process called flint knapping, but native peoples traveled to Yellowstone National Park for a couple different specific reasons. And one of the reasons that they traveled there, over 26 different tribes made use of Yellowstone for its obsidian. Obsidian was the correct answer of last week's question. A volcanic glass, as it's known, is a type of metamorphic rock that is formed by exceptionally slow cooling magma. So when magma comes to the surface of the earth, it's sometimes called lava, and it can cool in a variety of ways. If it cools very, 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 very fast, there's lots of holes in it, it's very lightweight, and it's sometimes called tuft or pumice. That would be a very fast cooling metamorphic rock. But if it cools very, very slowly, the slowest cooling type of metamorphic rock we have, it can form volcanic glass or obsidian, which is exceptionally sharp. Plastic surgeons, quite a few of them actually prefer to use obsidian scalpels, which are made and sterilized for the medical industry, instead of surgical steel, because they can make such a small cut. So if you're doing plastic surgery on the face, or you're trying to make repairs and you want minimal scars, they'll actually have these scalpels that are made today out of obsidian because they don't need to be sharpened. They're already sharper than surgical steel just by knapping the edge. So we have quite a few obsidian deposits between Yellowstone and Grand Teton National Park. Those are not available to rock collectors. You're not allowed to pick up rocks in the national parks, but we do have quite a few deposits outside of our national parks and the national forest and surrounding area as well, and those are open to collectors. So if you're a big obsidian collector and you'd like a piece for your own, it's definitely worth doing a little bit of rock hounding here in the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem. So big thanks to Sarah. Hopefully some of you guys got that question right. Hopefully some of you guys commented it in the comments section. We did already pick our winner for last week, so big thanks for all of you who participated. This week's question also comes to us from Sarah Ernst. Because last week was a little bit tricky, we're trying to make it a little bit easier this week. This is the one you need to comment the answer for a chance to win that $10 gift card. And the question is, do the mice and voles of the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem hibernate? Everybody got that one? I'll read it again. Do the mice and voles of the Greater Yellowstone ecosystem hibernate? Simple yes or no is all we're looking for in this case. And yeah, we'll get you that answer next week. Maybe we'll talk Sarah Ernst into talking a little bit about it and tell you a little bit more about what she has to say. But in the meantime, go ahead and give us an answer in the comment section if you think you know, and one of you guys will win that $10 gift card, which will absolutely buy you a $3.99 sticker or two, or some Great Gray Owl stickers, or all sorts of different things. We've got plenty of stuff that's less than $10 in the EcoTour store. So definitely check that out. All right. Super, super fun. Now we get to my very favorite part of the week, which is answering your questions. If you've got a question for me, go ahead and ask it in the comments section, and I'll see if I can't get an answer. Now, just so you guys know, I'm going to be looking down because I've got my iPad here where I'm looking at all of your questions. So if you see me looking down, sorry to be rude, but that's what's going on. And we'll see if we can't get you guys some answers. Okay, Karen says, I didn't see any pictures of $3.99 and her 4 cubs. Karen, if you're referring to our store, we definitely have some, unless they're sold out. Maddie will link to that. If you're referring to our broadcast today, a lot of people are asking, how's $3.99 and those cubs doing? For those of you guys who are not familiar with this whole situation, first of all, where have you been? Are you not a wildlife nerd? Come on, come hang out with the wildlife nerds. We're fun. Second of all, let's see. Let me start from the beginning. $3.99 is a grizzly bear. She's very famous. She's often called the most photographed grizzly bear in the world, most famous grizzly bear in the world. She actually currently has quadruplets that were born last January, and she's going to keep those cubs for about 2.5 years. She recently decided to go for a bit of a walkabout in Jackson Hole. She decided to leave Grand Teton National Park and go for a little bit of a stroll. She's in hyperphagia. She's desperately looking for food, and some of her traditional food sources have been a little bit slim this year. So she's made the decision to go ahead and head south. Of course, most human settlements in Jackson Hole, if you've never been to the area, are in the south, and those two things can be very dangerous. A lot of grizzly bear 399's cubs have been hit by cars over the years. We're very concerned, obviously, as she heads down to where there's more human use and traffic, that she could get into garbage or bird feeders or inappropriately stored dog food, or get into conflicts with dogs, or get hit by a car. All of those things are certainly a concern. Last week, we were very, very concerned about her location. She was definitely hanging out definitely in human areas. The bad news is she has not gone back into Grand Teton National Park as of today. The good news is that she is in a safe area, relatively free of human interference, and she has found some food reserves south of the valley. So this is gonna be a little gory, but the short version is of course our elk hunting season is ongoing. And hunters, when they hunt an elk, they leave gut piles in the woods. They leave the stuff they don't want to take with them. And a grizzly bear would think that's pretty darn delicious. So she and her cubs have found some of those gut piles. They are feeding on them. That's good because, of course, she hasn't been hit by a car, but that's bad for a couple different reasons. First of all, she's teaching the cubs to come south now every year. We're hopeful that those cubs will choose not to do it unless it's a really lean year, but that's not a good thing to teach 4 grizzly bears to come hang out in southern Jackson Hole. So we'd rather she didn't teach them that. The second problem, of course, is they're still not back. They still got to get all the way back through all those human use areas and navigate that gauntlet to get home. And the third issue, of course, is people are still hunting elk. We certainly don't want a conflict between a hunter and her. Hunters are moving very quietly through the woods in the same area. It'd be very easy to startle her and the cubs if they weren't careful. So a lot of concern there, but the good news is she's in a safe spot. She's in a much better place than she was last week. And we're very hopeful that as the weather turns, as we've talked about, she's just going to decide it's time to hibernate and get herself back up into Grand Teton National Park. So thanks very much. Hopefully I answered that question. I'm not entirely sure whether you meant the store or you meant where she is. But if you want a $3.99 sticker, they're in the stores. I just think that's so funny that Laura made the sticker. You guys are going to laugh when you see it. Let's see here. So on the same thing, Lori says, in $3.99, are cubs doing okay? Are they still way outside their usual territory? There you go. I guess I answered that one. Perfect. Let's see here. We had 2 questions. We'll do this one next. Susan says, is there any way to herd $3.99 back into the park? Long answer, it's complicated and we'd rather not. Short answer, not really. So the problem is when you can't move a grizzly. They're a grizzly. You can't just be like, shoo. You can, but it tends to not be something you'd want to do. So there's a general policy that we don't want to use rubber bullets and firecracker shells on a mother with cubs. Because we don't want her to get separated from her cubs, which would be very easy in a sort of panicked situation like that. So that's not a very good idea. We kind of avoid doing that with $3.99 anyway. We don't want to bait her one place or another because that'll just teach her that humans are a source of food. And remember that $3.99 is our favorite recovered grizzly garbage addict. She did, when she was young, get into the garbage behind Jackson Lake Lodge. So we certainly don't want our recovered bear, in other words, one who's not addicted to human food, get back addicted to human food. So baiting wouldn't be very successful either. You could sedate and remove all of those cubs. Some people have said, well, couldn't you trap them? 399 is 24 years old. She's been trapped multiple times. She is not a dumb bear, and she's certainly not probably going to be very trappable. She's too intelligent. Remember, grizzly bears are full of higher order cognitive thinking skills, what sometimes people call near human intelligence. They're about as smart as a 3 to 4 year old child. And she's quite a bit smarter than your average bear. Wow, I just made a pun. That was amazing. But that is true. And that she's been trapped multiple times. So she's probably not likely to fall for that. So then you get into sedation. And the anxiety that causes is very high for everybody involved. It's very, very hard to sedate animals when you don't know how much they weigh. We certainly don't know how much those cubs weigh. You certainly wouldn't want to get it wrong and kill them. And so because she's not bothering anybody where she is, you know what the safest thing to do is to let her be a bear, let her be a wild bear, let her be free of human interference, and let her do her thing. And work hard as humans to stay out of her way and keep our landscape clean of attractants, so she can get back safely. So the good news is she's in a good place, and she has not found any of those attractants, and we're certainly probably not going to try and herd or sedate or trap her back into the park, as long as she keeps her nose clean. Obviously, if she started getting into stuff, then Wyoming Game and Fish has said that's not off the table, but they really don't want to mess that up with the world's most famous bear. Can you imagine being Wyoming Game and Fish right now? You really, really don't want to mess this up. So kind of a tough situation for them for sure. Let's see. Is there a particular reason 399 couldn't find enough food within the park this year? That's a very complicated question. There's a lot of different opinions on that. And it gets into a little bit on how Grand Teton manages bears, but I'll give you sort of the short condensed version and see if that answers your question. So the short answer is yes, there were particular reasons. A couple different things happened. When people hit animals with cars in Grand Teton, elk, bison, deer, and the like, there is a place that they move those carcasses off the road. If they kept the carcasses, like elk and things, right on the side of the road, you'd have things like wolves and bald eagles and bears eating carcasses on the side of the road and being defensive over them, which would be very dangerous for people, but more importantly, we found out very early on in wolf reintroduction and some of these other issues that they get hit by cars when they're right on the side of the road. So there is a place in Grand Teton and a couple spots in Yellowstone National Park where they do move those carcasses. Different parks have different philosophies on how to handle that. In the case of Grand Teton National Park, it would be pretty impossible to keep bears away from that area. So those bears do know that's there and occasionally do make use of that area where animals are placed and do forage on them. 399 did get, sadly, a bison hit by a car earlier this year. She did feed on that with her cubs for a while, but a decision was made because of a growing disease in the region called chronic wasting disease that affects deer and elk, that they didn't want to put those animals at that dump site and potentially give any scavengers or corrupt the soil with chronic wasting disease. Chronic wasting disease, if you're not familiar, is in the same, it's basically the same disease as Creutzfeldt-Jacobson's disease in humans, or mad cow disease in cows, or scrappy in sheep. It's abnormally folded proteins, and of course abnormally folded proteins are not alive, so you can't kill them. It's very scary stuff. It can be transmitted from animals to humans. We have not found any real cases in Jackson Hole, but there was a moose in Star Valley, less than 40 miles from here, who tested positive. I think we recently also had a deer test positive relatively close to the valley. So we know that it's kind of creep in. And obviously we don't want to be getting our predators ill with that disease. So they were not putting the normal carcasses in the normal place. After 24 years of being used to that, that certainly was a little startling for. The area behind Pilgrim Creek was subject to a forest fire for much of the summer. That's an area she uses a lot. It's also an area that traditionally would have a lot of hunters and gut piles that she would make use of. So that was a problem for her as well. We also just had an overabundance of some berry crops and an underabundance of others. And so there was sort of these times of plenty followed by these more difficult times. And then there's the last but not least very honest situation of she's got 4 cubs. That's a tremendous amount of food that she's got to go ahead and provide for. The last time I recall 399 coming this far south or staying up for a really long time was when she last had triplets. So it certainly would make sense that she's doing what she's doing, because she's just got to find more food than she normally has to find, or any bear should have to find. She's got to find 4 bears worth of food. And so she's expanding her range a little bit in an attempt to do that. She's a big enough bear that other bears probably aren't going to bother her as much in those territories, other than really large male bears. And there certainly can be a risk from that, but there's not a lot of grizzlies in southern Jackson Hole. So from a grizzly bear's perspective, she's being darn clever. She's doing something really, really smart. From a human perspective, it's not in her best interest to be where she is, but you can't really argue with a grizzly bear. So hopefully that helps you guys with that. Let's see here. Is there a possibility she would not return to the park to hibernate? I'm assuming we're still talking about 399. Probably not. She's hibernated in the same area for a very, very long time. I'd be shocked. It's always possible, but there's not really a lot of good hibernatory locations in southern Jackson Hole. So my assumption is, yes, she will go north soon. Hopefully really soon. Let's see here. But what about the carcasses that are left naturally in the park and the bears find? Couldn't that have CWD? Yes, but we haven't found any CWD in the park yet. So, problem is, when CWD arrives in the valley, it arrives in the valley. We're not going to necessarily be able to control it very well, and we're going to have to learn to live with it, like places like Colorado and Wisconsin and the like have done. They've had CWD for a number of years, and they are very careful. Hunters test their animals to make sure that they won't become ill from them, but other than that, gotta let nature be nature. We're not really going to be able to control this disease very well. There have been attempts in the past, has not been very successful. So we'd like to keep it out of the valley. If you see any large hoofed mammals circling or behaving abnormally or drooling or sort of tilting to one side like they look like they might have a stroke, you report that to your local game and fish agency. That animal could have CWD, and it's well worth checking it out. So that's the best we can do under those circumstances. Let's see here. What else we got? Susan says, I have no idea it's that complicated. It's even more complicated, and I'm trying to make it simple. Everything in nature is complicated. That's what makes it fun. That's what gives me a good time, is all the complexity of life. Human life and animal life and life in general is wonderfully complex. It means we're never going to find all of the answers out there, and that there's so many more answers to be found. That's part of the reason I became a wildlife biologist, is because there were so many unanswered questions. And in Jackson Hole alone, it's really, really fun. If you chase things down a rabbit hole deep enough, you're going to find a plethora of unanswered questions. Off the top of my head, I could come up with 12 unanswered questions about just 399. How come she gets to have so many multiples and other bears don't? Does she have a genetic variation in her DNA? Why is she so much more successful raising cubs than other bears? It's not necessarily her size. Why is she so much more successful keeping her bears from male cubs than other bears? What sort of strategy is she doing? Where did she originally come from? As grizzly bears recover and we begin to see more genetic diversity in the species, what are we going to do when we run out of room and we reach the carrying capacity for grizzlies, but they still don't have enough genetic diversity to survive as a species? There's so many questions even just about grizzly bears that we could go on and on and on, and she's just a particularly fascinating example. I like to joke with my guests, if you've ever been out on tour and we talk about 399, grizzly bears tend to do so many different things because they have that higher order cognitive thinking skills. They are capable of these amazingly distinct personalities in the animal world, and it can be very easy to almost anthropomorphize them and give them human traits and characteristics because they are capable of this this reasoning that, an elk certainly wouldn't be capable of. And of course, it's a disservice to the bears to do that. That's why we refer to them by their research numbers and try to keep them as wild bears. But at the end of the day, they are just fascinating animals. And it's one of the great reasons that I became so fascinated with predators to begin with. And 399 certainly became a great bonus in that great journey that I've had following her for, 17 years now. She really is an incredible bear. So thank you guys so much for the questions. I'm so pleased that she's become so beloved by everyone around the world. Let's see here. Maybe we'll find some not 399 questions so that people who are tired of hearing about her won't get frustrated with me. One last, I guess. Don Meyer says, was a cub spotted trick-or-treating in Jackson? Yes, Don, there was a cub spotted trick-or-treating in Jackson. So my amazing mother sewed my 18-month-old daughter a $3.99 or $3.99 cub costume, depending on how you want to argue that. Maybe at the end of the broadcast, I'll put up a picture of my daughter Alta dressed as $3.99 for Halloween. But if you have not become a fan of our Jackson Hole EcoTour Adventures Friends and Fans group, which is where I posted that, maybe Maddie will put a link up to that group. Please do join us. We're just a bunch of animal nerds talking about things that make us happy. Lots of cool content coming in from guides every week of just stuff they're seeing, funny jokes and what have you. It's just sort of a fun little group. So if you've ever been out on a trip with us or you enjoy watching the Wildlife Wednesdays broadcasts, definitely join that group and you can see some pictures of my daughter as $3.99 or $3.99 cub, kind of hard to say. But yeah, my mom's amazing that she made my kid $3.99 for Halloween. How cool is that? All right, let's see here. What else we got? Have we heard from Laura since our Jimmy Chinish goat video? For those of you guys who don't know, Jimmy Chin is a local Jackson resident who won an Oscar last year for his filming of a film about Alex, what's his last name? Very famous climber in Yosemite, free soloing. So long story short, if you haven't seen Free Solo, that's Jimmy Chin. Laura is doing just fine. She's having a really fun off season. So thank you guys for your concerns about her. Do moose grow more impressive racks as they grow older? That's a really good question. So the short version is yes, until they're about 11 years old, and then the antler size actually goes down. So moose shed their antlers every year, and then they regrow a new set. And that antler grows in size and girth every year. They reach about an adult size about age like 6, I think is what the Alaska Game and Fish figured out in their research. And then they can live to be up to 14 years old. Oh, that's a little bit unusual. But after about age 11, those antlers actually start to diminish and get smaller because they're generally not herd masters at that point. So great question. Let's see here. Does Yellowstone Lake freeze over? Yes, it does. In the wintertime, usually either December or January, and it can freeze to thicknesses of up to 2 feet, which I know you're going, that doesn't sound very thick. It's one of the largest high altitude lakes in the world. It's a huge, huge lake. It's bigger than some states. So to freeze the whole thing to 2 feet thick, A, requires negative 40-degree temperatures on the regular, and B, requires just a tremendous amount of snow and ice and cold. So 2 feet is actually really, really impressive for a lake that large. So great question. Let's see here. How large do bighorn sheep get? So like a big trophy male bighorn sheep is going to be between about 300 and 350 pounds. But those horns on that sheep could be up to 35 pounds, which is just incredible to me. As we get more into the winter season and those bighorn sheep are making their way down into Miller Butte, we'll have lots more on bighorn sheep, but they are surprisingly big animals for sure. And they're in their breeding season right now, which is super fun. What's the bald eagle population in the park? Bill asks. Bill, I don't know the exact number. I know we have one of the greatest densities of bald eagles in the world. I know it's in the hundreds. We have golden eagles too, and of course osprey. So hundreds, I guess, is the best answer. We actually have bald eagles who come in just for our elk hunting season to feed from those same gut piles that the grizzly bears feed on. So kind of an interesting thing. In the way their migration, they actually come out of their way to come and munch for a while and then continue. So kind of crazy stuff. Let's see here. As bears forage before hibernation, are they more dangerous, cantankerous for hikers? Don, great question. Yes and no. Mothers with young cubs tend to be more aggressive. So in May, for instance, when they're really little, because they're guarding them a little better. As they get a little bigger and more able to defend themselves, they calm down a little bit. So those would be slightly less aggressive. But bears in hyperphagia who are grumpy and stuffing their faces 24 hours with food can be more grumpy. So the short answer is, if we look at the great book Stephen Herrero's Bear Attacks, Their Causes and Avoidance, which is a more interesting book than you'd think based on the title, I definitely recommend it. There isn't necessarily a seasonality to when bear attacks against people occur. Now, I want to remind everybody, of course, bear attacks are very, very, very rare. We average 2 per year in the United States for grizzly bears, so not necessarily something to be overly concerned about, but the fall is not necessarily going to be a bigger issue. However, they do, unfortunately, come in conflict with hunters more often in the fall. Like I said earlier, hunters are kind of sneaking around wearing camouflage. So kind of easy to startle a bear that way. And the bears, of course, are in the area because there's some bears that are actually attracted to gunshots because they know that's like the dinner bell ringing. They want to go steal that carcass from hunters. So can create some conflicts for sure. Let's see here. What method will Grand Teton National Park use to get rid of some of those mountain goats? Hunting. Linda, you have opened up a can of worms. The short version, just because we're running a little short on time here, is that Grand Teton National Park originally planned to have government hunters shoot them via helicopter. The governor of Wyoming was appalled by that idea. There was some conflict. Long story short, there is going to be a limited hunting season for residents of the state of Wyoming who are volunteers. They are not allowed to take any of what a hunter would consider valuable parts of the animal. They can't take the cape, i.e. the skin or the pelt. They can't take the head other than for testing purposes, but they can take the meat so it can be consumed, so at least it's not going to waste. This whole thing is obviously very controversial. There's a lot of different opinions on the matter, but the bighorn sheep population in Grand Teton definitely is in peril, and it is because of the mountain goats. So a lot of people are definitely really upset about it all in general. Unfortunately, it's not the mountain goats' fault that they have found a territory that they're invasive and not supposed to be in, and it's not the bighorn sheep's fault that their migratory pathway was closed down to the valley floor in the 1950s, and they're stuck up there and having a hard time. So nobody's a big winner here, but long story short, they are going to hunt them with volunteers who are specially trained by the Park Service. Hopefully that answers your question. Let's see here. All right, I think I got all of them. Let's see here. Hang on. Emily, I'd love to do it, but I'm not exactly what you're saying. Just say out loud that you wish we had a DEFE. A DEFE? Okay, I'm saying out loud that I wish we have a DEFE. Go ahead and write in the comment section if you want to clarify what you meant there, but I'm just having fun with that one. That's great, Emily. Let's see here. What fish are in the lake? Do eagles feed on these, or do they focus on elk guts? So eagles definitely can and are good fishermen, but they are scavenger birds. They will eat anything and everything. They're opportunists. They're generalists. They're not particularly good at anything. They're kind of mediocre at everything. So an osprey is a piscivore. It is a 100% fish eater. They do migrate out of the valley for the winter. They are specialists. They only eat fish. Bald eagles will certainly eat fish, but they'll also eat gut piles, and they'll also eat carrion, and they'll also eat ducks, whatever their nearest opportunity is. So for sure. Let's see. All right, we got any others? All right, guys, I think I got everything. It has been such a pleasure spending this Wednesday with you all. I hope you have a wonderful week. I will see you all hopefully next week. I hope you have a wild weekend. You stay safe. Thanks so much for joining us. Bye-bye.